Hey everybody, this is Mr. Mazzoro, and today I want to continue our topic on community ecologists by studying a specific area of community ecology, succession. We're going to talk about what is succession, and then we're going to go into talking about what it is, which is how plants take and create an ecosystem. And we're going to go into talk about the specific examples of succession, specifically how they create ecosystems when there is soil present and when there isn't soil present. So kind of a short lesson, but an important one nonetheless. Succession, like I said, is the development of an ecosystem over time, as one dominant species replaces another. It's how ecosystems change over time. And by time, I could mean years, or I could mean hundreds of years, or I could mean thousands of years. It depends on what is in the ecosystem to begin with. There is such a thing as primary succession. Primary succession happens when there is no soil present in an ecosystem. So soil has to be made. This happens when a glacier retreats or a volcano erupts. And what you have in either one of those situations is a lot of bare rock. The first organisms to take over in these scenarios is lichens and mosses. And the reason is because they actually produce acid that breaks down that rock, etches that rock into tiny little inorganic fragments, basically sand. And we have tiny little inorganic fragments etched in that rock or settling on the bottom of that rock, and an organism comes by and poops, pees, or dies in that sand. What you have is soil. After lichens and moss create the first little layer of soil, what you guess is the first grasses and annual flowers that take over, followed by larger things like shrubs, softwood trees, and then finally slow-growing but even larger hardwood trees. Secondary succession happens a lot faster, and that's because the big rate-limiting step of primary succession, the creation of soil, doesn't have to happen. Secondary succession happens usually over the course of years because soil's already there. It happens when a field is abandoned or after a forest fire. Here, soil's already there, so the first thing to come in is really within a year or two, you get those same grasses, annual flowers, and then you get small bushes, and then you'll get trees and the like coming in after that. But the rate-limiting step isn't there, soil production, so secondary succession is always going to be a lot faster than primary succession. What's important to realize is that none of these have an ending point. You can never look at a forest and say, cool, that's what that forest is going to look like until the heat death of the universe. Really, everything is constantly changing, constantly evolving. More soil is constantly being made. Nature is constantly taking over and reclaiming environments. In fact, that's basically what we spend billions and billions of dollars on, is fighting against nature taking over and reclaiming environments via floods or via forest fires. And yeah, sometimes we like a forest there, but that forest has a natural part of its life cycle where it's going to burn down. And then those ashes are going to settle into the soil, fertilize the soil, and you're going to have secondary succession. Any ecosystem is constantly in flux. It isn't static. And it's dealing with the disturbances that we do to it. The thing that you have to understand is what we don't want to do as human beings is disturb these ecosystems so much that they no longer produce from us what they need to produce for us, be that land or be that crops or be that anything. So that's that, succession, the creation of environments. This could be primary succession, where lichens and mosses move in before progressively larger and larger plants. When you see primary succession, there is no soil present. Stuff after what would happen after a volcano erupts or after a glacier retreats. Secondary succession, a little bit different. Secondary succession is a lot faster than primary succession because secondary succession, there's already soil present, things like a forest fire or an abandoned field. Since you don't need to create the soil, secondary succession is a lot faster. And even though we like to think about succession or ecosystems as being static, like we've always seen this forest here, so that must be the end part of that forest, really ecosystems are always in flux. They're always just ready. They're in another stage of their development. Even though we don't like forest fires, fire is a natural part of a forest life cycle. When a forest burns, that just clears way for other low-growing plants and secondary succession, and eventually that forest will reclaim the area that burned down. So that's it for today. In the next lesson, what we're going to go through is we're going to go through more about how plants grow and change their environment, and specifically how we cause plants to change their environment and the pros and cons of that.